Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. Water rides are a lot of fun and most of them are quite safe, but there's this one exception to that, and that is the Dinghy Slide. The Dinghy Slide is a very iconic water ride and one responsible for quite a few great memes. In this video we will take a closer look at the Dinghy Slide and see how good it actually is. First off, it's really cheap. With a price of just 20 euros for a straight piece on flat ground, it is the cheapest water ride and cheaper than all coaster types. This makes affording a Dinghy Slide quite easy. For example, the pre-built Demon Drop is roughly twice as cheap as a looping coaster with the exact same layout. And while you are barely paying anything for the ride, the guests are willing to empty their entire bank accounts for it. For this design that costs less than 2,500 euros, guests will pay almost 13 bucks per ride when it's brand new. This is only slightly less than the looping coaster variant, and that one has much higher stats, so your Dinghy Slide can make some good money. That is, if it weren't for the fact that the throughput is just downright bad. The dinghies have a capacity of only 2 guests, which is pitiful. This has 2 consequences which limit the throughput. Firstly, the ride has less capacity than a ride type which has 2 or even 4 across seating, so it is full a lot quicker. Secondly, there is a bit of time between each vehicle departing where no guests are boarding, which reduces the amount of guests that can enter the ride per time unit. What are the concrete effects of this? In the Demon Drop example, the Dinghy Slide has a maximum throughput of about 750 guests per hour. The looping coaster variant with only a single train almost doubles that with roughly 1450 guests per hour. Demon Drop isn't very optimized though, so let's change that. This design always has a boat ready to be boarded, no minimum waiting time and the entrance on the first station tile, so it has the highest possible throughput for a single station Dinghy Slide. It turns out this is about 1550 guests per hour. How does this stack up against other ride types? Not so great. This simple log flume design tops out at about 2100 guests per hour, and this tiny river rapids can handle 3200 guests per hour. Compared to coasters, it's even worse. This wooden coaster has about the same maximum throughput as the river rapids, and an optimized vertical drop coaster can sometimes even get close to 6000 guests per hour. So even the most optimized Dinghy Slide can process fewer guests per hour than most coaster types and water rides. This may not be a problem if it's in a secluded area of your park, as there aren't enough guests to fill it up anyway, but once you get more guests, the Dinghy Slide is one of the first tracked rides to max out. With a ride bonus value of 55, the Dinghy Slide doesn't attract a lot of guests to the park. The log flume and river rapids attract 65 and 70 guests respectively, and most coaster types attract between 75 and 120. It is better than or equal to all flat rides though, and it's much better than the Hardline Twister coaster. Now it's time to discuss the most important part of the Dinghy Slide, how to prevent it from crashing. In case you don't know, if you go over hills too fast, the inflatable dinghies will fly off the tracks and explode for some reason. With the extremely limited track piece selection, there are only 4 different pieces we need to worry about, which are the 4 slope transition pieces. All ride types that can fly off the tracks do so at a certain speed, which is different for each track piece. The level to gentle piece is the most forgiving, with a maximum speed of roughly 63 km per hour. The gentle to level piece has a slightly lower maximum speed of 50 km per hour. The transitions to and from steep are much more dangerous. The gentle to steep track piece can only handle a speed of about 40 km per hour, and the steep to gentle piece maxes out at a very low 27 km per hour. That last speed is so low that it is impossible for a Dinghy Slide to make it up a steep hill and not crash. Even with a chain lift piece at the top, the speed it needs to make it there is higher than the 27 km per hour that the steep to gentle piece can handle. So are upward steep track pieces just entirely useless on the Dinghy Slide? Not quite, as there is a way around all of this if you don't mind giving your guests a concussion. There is an option to transform any track piece that isn't a station or a chain lift into a tunnel. This looks really cool, but unfortunately it has no effect on the stats. It does have one very useful other effect though, and that is that a Dinghy Slide inside a tunnel cannot fly off the tracks. That's right, as long as you don't care about aesthetics, you can just turn every hilltop into a tunnel and your Dinghy Slide can no longer crash by flying off the tracks. Not only is this useful for going over hills way too fast, but it also prevents accidental crashes where it worked fine during testing but crashed for some reason later on. The dinghy vehicle is very light, so with guests in it, it is considerably heavier, causing it to lose a lot less speed over time. With tunnels, you don't need to worry about heavy guests suddenly going too fast after 2 years of accidentless operation. Before we get to the designs, let's take a look at the stat requirements of the Dinghy Slide. It needs to have a drop of at least 9 meters, a top speed of at least 25 km per hour and a length of at least 140 meters. If it fails to make any of these requirements, its stats get divided by 2 for every requirement it fails to make. Now the designs, which we only have 2 of today. First there is the small design, which with a price of only 867 euros is really cheap for what you get. If you have just one Dinghy Slide, guests will pay more than 10 bucks for it, and if you have multiple you can still charge at least 780. With the long station, this design almost reaches the highest possible throughput, making it about as efficient as possible. To save some extra space, you can build the exit and entrance buildings and their corresponding paths inside the ride area and connect it to a main path on the other side. The second design is much bigger and about as large as you want to go for an efficient Dinghy Slide design. It has a 12 tile station, which is the maximum length in Vanilla and Classic, and has a slightly lower throughput than the first design. If you make the ride any longer, the maximum throughput will go down and the extra stats you get back for that don't make up for it. This design once again uses the trick of having the track go over the queue line, using the space as efficiently as possible. You can find a download to both of these designs in the description. So that's the Dinghy Slide. It's a solid water ride that can make you decent money while smashing in the heads of all your guests. What's not to like? If you want to learn about another water ride, you can click here to learn about the river rapids. Thank you all for watching and I will see you in the next video.